Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. We have some really cool guests today, and I'm really excited to let people know about both of them.
Oh, no, me too, Renee. Glad to be with you today. And glad to have you all with us today on another edition of From the Woods Today. We've got Dr. DJ
McNeil.
Thank you.
He's been teaching all morning.
Sorry. Dr. DJ McNeil. He's going to be doing another edition of Wings of Kentucky. We always enjoy having him on. He's going to be talking about our feathered friends and what's going on with them right now. And then we also have from the Kentucky Division of Forestry, Mr. Chris Wiedamann. He's the Urban and Community and Urban Forestry Director for the Kentucky Division of Forestry. He's going to be talking a little bit about that program and how they serve folks here in Kentucky as well. So really excited to have both our guests on today, but glad to have you all with us for sure. If you have questions for either of our presenters, please use the chat function if you're with us on Zoom, and if you're a YouTube viewer or a podcast listener, thank you. And you can hit us up via email at forestry.extension@ukyi.edu, and we can respond to any questions you might have there. But Renee, glad to be with you on this beautiful day here in Lexington, Kentucky, coming to you live from the campus of University of Kentucky.
Exactly. It's very pretty today. I love it.
It's gorgeous.
Get outside if you can.
Yeah, enjoy it while you can. Yeah. It's going to be a warm week here in Kentucky, it looks like.
That's true. That's true. So let's go ahead and get started. And Dr. DJ McNeil cannot be with us because he actually teaches a class, but he has a very great program for us to enjoy. And so if you want to go ahead and get that started, that'd be awesome.
I sure will. Thank you.
Okay, folks, welcome to another Wings of Kentucky. It is currently September 7th. I'm excited to share with you some late summer bird observations and some ecological tidbits about birds preparing for migration. So I'm DJ McNeil with the University of Kentucky, Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. And let's talk about some of the birds and bird behaviors that we're starting to observe as summer comes to a close and fall sets upon us. And this time of year is an interesting time of year from an avian perspective because we see a lot of species that are either finishing reproduction or preparing for migration. So here on the left, we've got an image of 4 mallards. And they look all kind of like females to the untrained eye. But what we actually have here is 1 female and 3 males. In the case of the mallard, the way we can tell them apart in the summertime or the late summer and early fall is the males don't have that bright green head they normally have. Take a look at that beak. The male has a sort of a greenish yellow beak, where the female has a orange beak with a mottled black saddle across it. But otherwise, the males can look quite similar to the female. These males, however, are actually starting to molt back into a plumage that resembles a normal male. Mallards and most waterfowl, they're actually kind of on a reproductive schedule that's a little different than most birds. And the reason for that is they actually court and pair up in winter time, like really early. So that way, by the time spring hits, they're already paired up. So ducks kind of do things super early. So because of that, actually a lot of waterfowl are starting to transition into their breeding plumage for winter. Now, most of them still look pretty ugly, like these ones. But these little gray feathers that are coming in here, those are the breeding feathers of the mallard. But most birds are actually kind of doing the opposite right now, where they're going into their drab plumage for the year, if they have a drab plumage. The other thing we see a lot of this time of year is a lot of immature birds, a lot of fledglings, a lot of juveniles, etc. So like these cute little barn swallows, they're probably the last brood of the year, and they're getting ready to fledge and be on their own for the season and for the rest of their lives. And that's where we're at with the reproductive cycle. Another thing we see a lot of are juvenile birds. So these little guys here are what we call nestlings, and once they jump out of the nest, they're fledglings. But after parents stop taking care of them, they transition into the life stage that we call juvenile. So this here is an American robin. This one looks pretty robin-y because it's got a very rufusy breast, but they don't all look so robin-y. Some of them are really confusing looking, and it's vaguely thrush-like, but otherwise it's unclear what species it might be. The robin as a juvenile has this sort of like patterned face, more patterned than the adults even. It has spots on the back and on the wings and very heavily spotted breasts and sort of flanks. that juvenile plumage is only worn for a few weeks, and they molt that plumage, which is the term we use for a bird shedding its feathers and growing new feathers. It's going to molt those feathers into something that looks like the typical adult robin. Another thing you're going to see are a lot of juvenile cardinals here in the inner bluegrass region, which look, they've got the crest like a cardinal and this really huge bill, which is sort of typical of many cardinalids and grosbeaks. But at a certain stage, they're a little difficult to sex. We're actually going to talk a little bit about sexing young cardinals in a bit, but you're going to see a lot of these young cardinals that are just like ugly. Their feathers aren't going to be as nice and compact as on an adult bird. They're that fluffier, uglier plumage. In the case of the cardinal, we also have a dark beak when they're juveniles. You're also going to see a lot of birds like this red-bellied woodpecker male being harassed by their fledglings that are begging for food. And a lot of adult birds like this Carolina wren that they look rough. In fact, you might be forgiven for confusing this bird with a fledgling because it looks pretty ugly. This bird is an adult in this case, and it's just had a rough breeding season. Its feathers are torn and tattered, and it's time to be done with the baby making for the year and just molt your feathers, rejuvenate your body, get ready to either migrate if you're the kind of bird that migrates, or to prepare for the non-breeding season, which is an essential part of the avian life cycle for these non-migratory species. And of course, the migratory species have a non-breeding period as well. So let's talk about the American goldfinch for a minute. And yes, I recognize the bird you're looking at here is not an American goldfinch, right? So this is an American robin, and this is one of the birds of the world breeding cycle maps. And I know it's confusing. I'm going to show you how to read it. So I've here's what it is, and then I've blurred some stuff out so we can just focus on it. So we've got December, January, February, and the whole year, right? So this is around New Year's, and we're right in here. And what you see here is this inner circle that I've got hidden is molt. I've got this middle circle, which is reproduction, and then the outermost circle, which is migration. But we're going to just look at breeding. So eggs and young. So we see the innermost circle is young, the outermost circle is eggs. And in the case of the American robin, which I'm going to contrast with the goldfinch, so we're here. So there are no birds really that have a lot of young, and there are no birds that have eggs, right? They are totally done reproducing for the year. If we back off, we can see we're right in sort of the tail end of molt, and migration is starting and is going to continue until Christmas or so. That's the American robin. Let's talk about the goldfinch, though. The goldfinch is sort of special because that species is actually still breeding this time of year. It's very unusual. So if we look at the reproductive period, they're kind of at the tail end of their breeding cycle. And they're going to have a lot of fledglings, and some birds are still going to have nests with nestlings in them this time of year. Now, molt is going to really get into full swing, getting my circles mixed up here, into full swing here shortly. We're going to look at goldfinch molt in a few minutes, and the migration is going to happen shortly after that. Here in Kentucky, depending on what part of Kentucky you're in, but in the bluegrass region, we're going to have our goldfinches pretty much all year round. Some of our birds may go south for the winter, and we may receive birds from up north that winter here. But long story short, we're going to have goldfinches all year round in most winters in the bluegrass region. So the goldfinch is special in that it's reproducing this time of year. It's one of the latest breeding birds that we have in Kentucky. And a big part of this is the species dependency upon thistles and other seed-bearing plants, asters and coneflowers and things like that. Where it obtains those seeds that develop really late in the year. Now, this is the female American goldfinch. You're going to see a lot of these this time of year, and we're also going to see a lot of males, which look like this. So this is a breeding female. This is a breeding male. We're going to talk about those molts that look different between the breeding season and the non-breeding season. But let's listen to some of the vocalizations you're going to hear a lot this time of year. We're at the end of the breeding cycle, but you may still hear some birds singing. But let's focus on the two most common calls produced by adults, because the song often incorporates those. So they're pretty easy to memorize. Both male and female produce these calls. One call that they do all the time, all year round, is the potato chip flight call. And it's called the potato chip flight call because it sounds like they're saying potato chip, or some people say patiti, which I don't think is as fun. So I usually teach potato chip. So let's listen to that potato chip call. And of course, there's a chipping sparrow gumming up the works here. But let's listen one more time and focus on that little, very soft potato chip. Potato chip. Sometimes they'll throw in an extra note or two, but it's potato chip. The other call that the American goldfinch does very often this time of year is the baby, which is a very rich, kind of like slurred baby call. Now, the male song, which you're not going to hear that much this time of year, but you probably will hear it a little bit, is a really complex mix of trills and slurred notes and various calls, and they often incorporate the potato chip and or the baby into it. This is an example of a song of a male American goldfinch, only produced by the males. Now, more to the point, what we're often seeing this time of year, and again, we're going to see those adults, we're going to see a lot of birds that look like this. And that doesn't look very much like a goldfinch, but it is. And you can see the little bit of blush of the yellow to the face. We've got the wing bars. We've got this white edging on the tertials. This is a juvenile American goldfinch or a fledgling, depending on whether the parents are still caring for it. And yes, you're going to see individual young birds like this, but more often than not, you're going to see a whole pack of young ones harassing mom and dad to give them food. And the reason I bring this up is they produce a very distinctive call that is just pervasive. This chickpea, chickpea, chickpea call, and it's all over the place when you've got a food resource for goldfinch. Here is that chickpea juvenile or fledgling call. So in this case, this bird's going chick, chick, chickpea, chickpea, chick, chick. Here is a more aggressive group, shall we say. Why can't I click? There we go. So certainly be on the lookout or the listen out for American goldfinches in all their life stages right now. Now let's talk about that molt. The goldfinch, especially, we'll talk about the male because it's more distinctive in the male, but it happens in the female too. We've got this very bright breeding season plumage, and they transition into this dull winter plumage. And in the winter time, the males and the females are kind of tricky to discern. It's easier to tell them apart if you're holding the bird, but seeing them with binoculars, it's pretty tough to tell the male and the female apart. You almost always have some amount of yellow on the face, but notice in the case of the male, and this is a male, we lose that black cap and the bill becomes really dingy, oftentimes no hint of orange to it, and we get a lot of brown coloration to the back. The wings and the tail stay the same color, but you lose most of that yellow that we had. Now the wings have a bit of yellow, and they actually still do, but it's like hidden and they don't show it very often. So as we go into fall and winter season, these birds are going to transition into their very drab winter plumage. And that makes sense, right? You don't want to be this color, or excuse me, you don't want to be this color throughout the winter. That's going to make you more susceptible to predators. It's better to be this drab, more sensible plumage throughout the non-breeding season. And then when spring rolls around and you need to look sexy and attract a mate, you grow those yellow feathers again. This hideous cardinal is another thing we see a lot this time of year. This is a form of extreme molt that we see in a variety of different species of birds. I don't know why. It happens a lot in birds that have large crests. So the cardinal is a species that does it a lot, and the blue jay, which is not related to the cardinal really, also tends to develop this molt where they lose all their head feathers at one time and look pretty hideous. I get a lot of people asking me if these are birds that are sick or anything like that, and no, that's normal. Cardinals don't always do this, but they very commonly do. Some birds molt in a more respectable way. Other birds just do this like full head molt. But don't worry, in a few weeks, here's like a blue jay, right? You can see all these little weird pin feathers coming in. Those are the vascularized feathers as they're growing. That bird's going to start looking more like this, and this, and this, and eventually look like a normal blue jay in this case, or a cardinal, or what have you. In the case of a lot of these birds, like cardinals and blue jays and several other many other species, they only molt one time per year, and this is the time of year that one molt happens. So they are replacing their feathers once a year. Birds that molt only once a year naturally are only going to have one plumage, right? So the blue jay does not have a breeding and a non-breeding plumage. It's just blue and striped and barred all year round. And that's just how it always looks, because it only molts once a year to refresh those feathers. Birds that have breeding and non-breeding plumages are going to molt twice a year. So this is what I'm talking about here. So this is a sort of complex basic strategy. This is using the Eastern towhee. And these are kind of like cartoons that show you what the feathers are doing. And this is what the bird actually looks like seeing it in the field. And this is similar to a blue jay. You've got the juvenile plumage when it jumps out of the nest. And then as it enters into its first winter, it's going to molt into something that closely resembles the adult plumage, but you're going to have some wing feathers or tail feathers, or maybe both, that are retained as the juvenile, and it goes into its first breeding season wearing some of those baby feathers. And then as it hits its second fall, it finally molts into its real adult plumage. But those species that have two plumages, it gets way more complex. So this stuff here on the left shows kind of the cartoons. Here on the right shows like the real thing. In the case of the scarlet tanager, where we've got yellow winter plumage and red summer plumage, the first year birds do this, where they come out with juvenile plumage, quickly molt into something that looks like the adult's wintering plumage, but it retains some of those juvenile wing and tail feathers. And then as it goes into its first breeding season, it continues to retain some of those juvenile feathers. And then finally, when it's in its second fall, it gets a full fresh set. And then for the rest of its life, it bounces back and forth here. Or in the case of the towhee, it just has one plumage. So it just molts this once a year and refreshes. The tanager bounces back and forth. It's a messy thing. Molt is like something that bird people get kind of nerdy about. It's a little confusing to wrap your head around at first. Another thing that's happening this time of year is a lot of birds are developing a lot of fat. And this is a key thing for getting ready for migration. In a lot of birds, they're storing fat here, kind of on the outside of the gastrointestinal organs. And then here in the fulcrum, they have like sort of a hollow pocket where fat can be stored. And fat's super important for birds that are getting ready to migrate. There's the obvious reason that they're burning a lot of energy or expending a lot of energy, and they can store energy in that fat. But they can also store, essentially store water in fat. As the fat's metabolized, that turns into water that the birds can use when they're flying, say, over the Gulf of Mexico, or any other large obstacle that requires them to sustain flight without stopping to drink. Another interesting phenomenon that we see a lot this time of year, especially here in sort of the border between the South and the Midwest, we see a lot of these mixed blackbird flocks. So this is a big flock of common grackles. This is a common sight this time of year. These are mixed blackbirds. I'm going to talk about what species comprise a flock like this, but you can see several different species in there. Same here, we've got a mixed species flock, and actually we've got some non-blackbirds in there too. So what species are we seeing this time of year often doing this mixed species flocking? Well, of course, the red-winged blackbird, which looks like this. We're very familiar with it. The female red-winged blackbird, a little bit more tricky to identify, easy to mix up with a sparrow, but if you see it in a blackbird flock, you're going to know what it is. Brown-headed cowbird, we're going to see the males, but we're also going to see females mixed in there. So these are all blackbirds. The common grackle, the adult has that white iris. Those form into these mixed species blackbird flocks. These are all in the same family together. And of course, the European starling, which is sort of the odd man out. Not only is it not native, it's not a blackbird, but it behaves kind of like one and forms these mixed blackbird flocks, if you will, and tends to join up with a lot of blackbirds. One thing I warn people about this time of year are these tricky birds undergoing the pre-basic molts, or actually the pre-formative molts in the case of young birds. The European starling, so wearing mostly that juvenile plumage, but we're seeing that first basic plumage starting to bleed through, the spotted breast plumage and these sort of greenish glossy plumage elsewhere. So these birds can really trip you up. You're like, whoa, what am I looking at? It's got weird patches of dark mixed with light. And then we also see it in brown-headed cowbird males. So all male and female starlings go through this, and then only male cowbirds have this really tricky plumage here. Females, of course, do a similar molt, but the juveniles and the females look really similar, so it doesn't produce this like stark, like kind of black and brown mottled pattern. So beware, you'll see a lot of these types of birds at your feeder too, and it'll kind of be startling the first time you see it. We also see birds like indigo buntings that'll actually breed looking like this, that are starting to molt into that sort of mottled plumage. And we see a lot of cardinals. So the thing about cardinals is they're really easy to age and sex. So if it's still got a dark portion to the bill, it can be somewhat tricky. But by the time that a cardinal has an orange bill, it is sexable. So this is a young male. Here you can see it's got a black bill. This one here is also a young male. You can see he's got a dark bill, and we're getting a lot of those bright red feathers. This one's even brighter. So these two are young juveniles that are, male and destined to look like a traditional male. By the time the bill is orange, it is sexable. So if it looks drab and it has an orange bill, it might be a young bird, but that means for sure it's a young female. Beyond cardinals and blackbirds, we also see a lot of mixed species flocking activity happening this time of year with these long-distance Nearctic, neotropical migratory songbirds. So those would be things like warblers. Like this is a chestnut-sided warbler in its fall plumage, which of course generally or mostly lacks that chestnut side, has the droop-down wings, the cocked tail, the white eye-ring, the green back and crown, etc. Red-eyed vireos and other species of vireos are going to form these flocks with the warblers. You're going to see gnatcatchers in there, a variety of flycatchers. This is the eastern wood pewee, for example. Sparrows, like this is a non-breeding chipping sparrow in there. And they're going to basically hook up with like our non-migratory resident species like the Carolina chickadee, white-breasted nuthatch, downy woodpecker, and these migratory birds are going to follow our resident birds around and say they're coming from up north, and they say, hey, this chickadee here kind of knows the area. I'm only hanging out here for a few days or a week to just refuel on my migration. I'm going to follow this guy around who knows this place, knows how to keep out of danger, and knows where all the food is. And we've already got some species that are already gone for the year, like orioles are largely gone, yellow warblers, many shorebirds, Louisiana water thrushes, and a variety of other species have already migrated for the year. So migration is ongoing now. One thing I like to listen for this time of year at the beginning of migration, really through all of migration, are nocturnal flight calls. So many don't realize that these small songbirds, especially, they migrate at nighttime. So if you go out at night, especially right at sunrise and sunset, you can listen up to the sky and you'll hear birds chipping and calling. And one that you hear frequently is the Swainson's thrush, which is this guy here, produces this nocturnal flight call, which sounds kind of like the peep of a spring peeper. So let's listen to that. It's rather quiet, and that's how it'll be when you hear it in the field. You just listen to the sky and you hear that weep, that soft little nocturnal flight call. One other thing, and here's the link to it, is Cornell's Birdcast, which is a super cool migration mapping tool. If you want to know whether it's a good time of year to go look for migratory birds, you can check it out. This is the map from last night. So actually, let me restart this. So this red line that you see advancing across the United States is sunset. And you see it come, and then boom, all these migratory birds are moving south. The arrow indicates the directionality of the movement. And as you see a yellow line come across, which will happen in just a moment here, that's sunrise. And you can see sunrise really puts a damper on a lot of the migratory activity. But even here in the south, we still see a lot of birds migrating in the early morning. But man, let's take a look again. This is last night, September 7th. Let's have a look at, you see sunset, and then boom, all of these migrants heading south. And you can look it up they've got them archived for years past. You can look up, every day for the past week or every day for the past 5 years, whatever you want to do. But it uses radar, the same technology that measures, weather, to map the migratory activity of nocturnal migrant birds. So check that out. We will leave it there. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining in for another Wings of Kentucky. Looking forward to next time.
Dr. McNeil always gives us tools that are just amazing. I mean, I'm going to have to get on that and just sit there. I was like, I've Googled this. Oh, he's done.
No, I was trying to get over there too. I was like, yeah, no, I really appreciate Dr. McNeil. He does such a great job with that Wings of Kentucky.
Yes.
Again, there's so much interest in birds and, what's going on with birds. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate his contributions to the show. I know our viewers do as well.
Definitely. Speaking of contributions, we have another person who's going to be doing that. So, Chris, if you'd like to turn your camera on. Welcome to the show. And I think he's a first timer, Billy.
Oh,
the show anyway. I know we've had him on different things.
Okay, I thought we had Chris before, but Chris, a first timer. Yay! We always love first timers on the Woods today. We're always trying to grow this audience, and you play such an important role here in Kentucky as the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator here for the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited. That was a phenomenal bird piece there. And I love seeing those maps. One of my favorite parts of being a field forester was actually seeing those little groups of songbirds migrate through the woods.
Oh, cool.
Gorgeous. That's not what I'm here for.
All right, you can talk about that too.
That was really one of my favorite parts of being a field forester. I will share my screen here.
All right.
Wonderful.
Pull up my presentation. I do love birds. Ornithology was one of my favorite classes to take at UK. And I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about urban and community forestry. I was super jazzed when Renee reached out and asked me to be on today. And so I'll just launch right into it. I thought today I could cover kind of a canopy level overview of what urban forests are and a bit about urban forestry. And then talk about our program here at the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And I will occasionally shorten urban and community forestry down to UCF because it is a mouthful, and Kentucky Division of Forestry down to KDF. Also a bit of a mouthful if you had to continuously say it. But talk about our program and then also just leave you with a couple of urban and community forestry resources as well. Again, by way of introduction, my name is Chris Wiedamann. I am the Urban and Community Forestry Program Coordinator for the Kentucky Division of Forestry. I am a forester. I graduated from the University of Kentucky in forestry. I'm also an ISA, International Society of Arboriculture certified arborist, and an environmental educator. And so urban forests. not something we often think about. Sometimes folks think it's kind of an oxymoron. And so I thought I'd talk about what our urban forests are. And usually the way I like to begin this discussion is just talking about what makes up a forest. And so the obvious answer, our traditional forests are made up of trees, right? But forests are actually made up of so much more than just our trees. It has to do with what soils we have there. All life needs soil. And then the weather and climate that impact that community of trees, as well as the animals and small plants that live there. And one of the things I really like to emphasize when we talk about just what forests are is that it includes us. We're a pretty big component of forests, even if we don't directly live in them. We consume and impact those forests directly, pretty in a real way. Whether it's in the wood that's in our tables, or the buildings we live in, or the secondary forest products, the environmental services that forests provide us in clean air and clean water, as well as a whole host of other benefits. And we have a connection back and forth with those communities. And so, thinking about urban forests in relation to traditional forests, right? And kind of expanding our ideas about those communities of trees where we live, because they also make up an urban forest ecosystem. We have an urban ecosystem where we live, and we're part of that. And we've substantially changed parts of that, right? We still have soil essential for life, but we've also added things like hard infrastructure, roads, streets, buildings, and roofs that have changed that ecosystem and make it a little different than our traditional forests, as well as things we've brought into our yards and gardens with us that change the makeup and components of that forest community. And of course, we're there, but in our urban settings, our urban ecosystems, we're a large part of that. And so making that connection and kind of thinking broader out about where we live, our communities, both natural and human, and those urban forests is important because our urban forests are right outside our front doors, in our backyards, from our smallest towns and communities to our largest metropolitan areas. And one of the reasons we use urban and community forestry is to recognize that, the word urban has a connotation of being those highly dense, skyscrapery, kind of concrete canyon areas, but that's not all of our urban and community forest area. It also implies those smaller communities too, that maybe those trees are just around the street and the edges of parking lots, and they're important. And so when we think about all of our trees together, um, all of those trees from our parks, which are really, when we say urban forestry, is the first thing folks think of, because that's like one of the places we go where we have the most connection where we live with a large grouping of trees. But it's more than that. It's street trees, it's the trees on edges of parking lots, it's community gardens and green spaces also make up that urban forest landscape, as well as the trees in our front and backyards. Those are essential components of our community's forests. To give some context, both in Kentucky and nationally, about our urban forests, um, over 50%, verging on 60% of Kentuckians live in or near urban areas, and that number is traditionally going up. And nationally, that number is around or over 80% of Americans live in urban areas. Um, of those communities, urban communities in Kentucky, over 35% of Kentuckians live in communities that are recognized for managing their urban forests. Nationally, that number is a little closer to 50%, which, if you think about that, is really cool. 80% of folks living in urban areas, and of those communities, almost 50% of them live in communities that have recognized that urban forests are important and are managing them. I always think it's really important to point out too where these forests are and who owns them. In Kentucky, our urban forests track pretty similar with our traditional forests. And so 80%-ish, depending on where you are, regionality, of our urban forests are in private hands with private property owners, our front and backyards. And the same thing with nationally with our urban forests, only a little less because ecoregions change. It's a little drier in the Southwest, etc. But around 70% of our urban forests nationally are in residential or vacant lands on private land. And so that's really important to recognize that like private individuals have a great impact on helping sustain our community's urban forests. Um, they're not just street trees or park trees. There are trees in our backyards. And that's a really cool thing because if we think about the benefits that those trees are providing, all of those benefits are right on our doorstep. Um, and so things like reducing stress, cleaning our air, managing stormwater, trees are literal living water pumps, bringing water out of the ground and putting it into the air. And then just the impacts on our own wallets at home. So helping reduce cooling costs in the summer and heating costs in the winter, depending on where those trees are placed around where we live. We get a ton of benefits from living around trees. And so I like those things. Obviously, this is what I do. And as communities, when we begin to recognize and say, this is important, we want to manage those moving into the future. And so coming together as communities to say, this is important, let's sustain that. And part of the conversation in thinking about urban forests and urban trees is recognizing that urban forests and urban trees are infrastructure. They're essential components of the communities where we live. And we kind of need to think about that and how we invest in traditional infrastructure like roads and sidewalks. And that these trees are important too. They're a green infrastructure where we live, and we should manage that and invest in that. And taking directly from traditional forestry and cyclical forest management, we can do that in urban areas with these urban forests. And so first step is thinking about evaluating those forests, doing an inventory, individual tree inventory, canopy analysis, and then forming a plan, recognizing where our needs are, where we may need to plant in the future, where we need to maintain older trees. And so we can build a plan around managing these trees in our communities. And then finally, at the end of the life of these trees, thinking about utilizing those and keeping that carbon in the system in the form of wood products. And we can do that in urban areas, just as we do in traditional forestry. And that's where the Kentucky Division of Forestry comes in. Um, Kentucky Division of Forestry, KDF, has a variety of programs that we implement to help protect and conserve the forest resources of the Commonwealth. People usually think of us as the khaki and green clad folks out in the woods, but urban forestry is also a component of our state's forest resources. And so I'll talk a bit about our program. Our program is funded through the USDA Forest Service through grants. And I think that's really important to point out because the USDA Forest Service is a federal organization. And so at a federal national level, they've recognized the importance that trees have in our communities and have decided to put funds into sustaining these. We have a two-person team covering the whole state. So myself and I'm the program coordinator. We also have a partnership coordinator, and they primarily focus on our recognition programs. And I'll talk about those in a second. But we both provide technical assistance and education to folks caring for trees across the state. And I usually say anywhere we live around trees, or more importantly, need to. Um, and our overarching goal for the state is to help develop long-term, self-sustaining urban and community forestry programs that make our communities healthier, more economically viable, stronger, and safer for the Commonwealth. Um, and thankfully, we have a lot of folks to work with out there caring for the woods and our urban forests. And that starts with like city staff. So urban and community forestry program staff within cities, parks and recreation staff, public works staff, as well as state, federal, municipal partners, tree boards, which are phenomenal community organizations of public folks that have come together to help think about and promote the management of the trees in their communities. And then nonprofit organizations, the organizations out there helping care for and plant our community's trees. And then also the educational institutions that are out there doing phenomenal urban forestry and forestry education work through extension and university settings. And then, of course, like the people like you and I, the folks that have these trees in their front and backyards that are essential to maintaining our urban canopies. Um, what do we do? So we have recognition programs to like give shout outs and say these folks are doing good work. Occasionally, when funding is available, we have grant programs available to help promote and kind of seed urban and community forestry programs and education. And then technical assistance in education, things like today, where we reach out and we give professional knowledge about how we can manage these resources. Um, our recognition programs are actually run through the Arbor Day Foundation, and locally we oversee three of them here in Kentucky. So those three are the Tree City USA, the Tree Campus Higher Education, and then the Tree Line USA. Tree City USA is kind of our bread and butter bulk of what we do with our recognition programs. But all of these programs help to promote urban forestry and urban forest management and connect people with the trees in their communities. And one of the criterias for all of them is an investment in these types of programs and trees, but also celebrating trees. We have a tree holiday and Arbor Day. And so having a celebration and recognition of the importance of these trees in our communities. There are five main recognition programs run through the Arbor Day Foundation. There's actually kind of a sixth, and I'll talk about that in a second. Looking at our Tree City USA program, so last year we had 39 communities recognized as Tree City USA communities. And actually, we have one kind of higher recognition program city here in Kentucky, which is a Tree City of the World, which is really exciting. And they kind of went an extra step above and beyond in managing their urban forests. Of those communities, they invested over $12 million in urban and community forestry, which is really exciting to think about. And if you break that down by the numbers, that's around $8 per capita per person invested in urban forestry, which is like the cost of a cup of coffee some places, which isn't a whole lot for the amount of impact and return that we see in the state. And so when we think about those economic impacts, there are over 4,000 people employed just in urban forestry in Kentucky. Um, the economic footprint of urban forestry alone is above $500 million. That's pretty big. And then the wellness and environmental benefits that we receive for that $8 per person is upwards of $2 billion, which is pretty substantial for the input we've been putting in. And so when we think about the inputs we're putting in and what we get out benefit wise from our trees, if we have the funds available, we try to seed those funds into communities to help increase this investment in our urban forests and grow our urban forest programs. Um, and so last year, we were able to launch a grant program, the Kentucky Urban and Community Forestry Assistance Grant. This was provided in partnership with the USDA Forest Service, again, to promote and enhance urban forestry programs through the state. We had $1.8 million available for Kentucky alone for local governments, educational institutions, nonprofits. And we were really excited with the turnout of what we had. We were able to spread that money across the we applicants we were able to fund. One of them had to back out. And so we were able to put $1.6 million into urban forestry alone and help grow urban forestry programs throughout the state. And the things they're doing are really exciting. And so these are communities, small communities to large communities that are planting trees, growing urban and community forestry workforce with workforce development programs, doing canopy assessments, tree inventories, updating their tree ordinances, and education programming from kindergarten to adults to help grow tree stewards of the future, which are essential for maintaining our community canopies. Um, Doing greenway planning and urban forestry planning, as well as hardscape to greenscape conversion. So either creating silvicells and soil areas underneath the hardscape for trees to root into where they otherwise couldn't, or actually physically taking up the concrete and blacktop to put in green space. which is really exciting in our urban areas. Um, and so those are kind of some of the things that we do here at KDF with our urban and community forestry program. The technical assistance and education stuff doesn't lend well to slides, but I do always like to share some of my top favorite resources. The first one, treecanopy.us, is a partnership with a mapping organization and the USDA Forest Service, and it models and kind of shows percentage of tree canopy across the nation in our urban areas and begins to show the change in that canopy. A really cool tool to noodle around and explore. And then the other one is the Vibrant Cities Lab. This is a fantastic resource for folks that are interested in getting involved in building urban forestry programs in their communities. Absolutely wonderful resource for all that kind of information. And then the last one is my absolute go-to document. Have it in my back pocket at all times. It's the U.S. Forest Service's Tree Owner's Manual. This is a one-stop shop for all things tree care. Has fantastic graphics and diagrams in it. Everything from planting, pruning, the whole gambit is in that resource. It's free as a PDF online. Check it out. With that, I'll round out. I threw a lot of things out there at once. And so if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer questions. Um, yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I already downloaded that PDF on the tree care one. That was awesome. I was like,
resources, it's great.
yeah. So someone just asked if you could show the QR codes again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good
And
stuff.
ideally they work. I didn't check them before I started. I just realized this.
I know the last one does because I just did that one.
Yeah.
And we were talking before the show of a couple of other items that you could be doing as far as show topics. So I think folks, he's going to come on and do one about pruning in January and that kind of thing. So it's tree things that people need to know about, and that's what I love.
Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff. Chris, thank you so much. Really do appreciate your presentation and the work that you all do, right? It's so critical to connect those urban areas to the trees and their importance. And yeah, I really appreciate what you all do.
And I know just my own personal, I never thought, at Kentucky Division of Forestry, I was always thinking of, forestry as forests. I wasn't thinking urban forests. So it was nice to put that connection with KDF.
Yeah, thanks. I love talking about that stuff.
Well, we'll certainly have you back.
Sure. Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh, Renee, good presentation.
Awesome show, right?
Really appreciate Dr. McNeil and his great presentation, kind of keeping us up with what's going on with the birds of Kentucky. And
that bird mapping thing, I'm going to have to check that out. That was really cool.
Yeah, well, we'll have to brag on him about that one. But I appreciate your all's interest in the subject, as well as having Mr. Chris Wiedamann with us from the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Great guests, great topics, but it's all about you all, right? You've got to let us know what you all want to see. How can we help you all know more about our woods and wildlife and natural resources and take care of those a little bit better? So let us know anything you all would like to learn about. Again, we always say it, if you're dealing with it, there's a good chance others in the state are also dealing with it. So it's an opportunity for us all to learn together. And Renee does such a wonderful job of tracking down some experts to cover subject areas that we can't cover internally here. So appreciate that, Renee. But thank you all for being with us each week. We really do appreciate it.
We really do. And, if you go to fromthewoodstoday.com, you can watch everything. Usually we post the shows within a couple of days, no more than a week. So all of our shows are posted there. So every one that we've ever done, I don't know, 250 or more.
And growing, right?
I say that every week, every year. I'm going to have to go 251, 252. I have to start doing that.
There's a lot of content on there.
There's a lot of content, exactly. Everything from tree ID to forest fires, and everything in between. So I have been asked by some people if we can start telling what's going to be on next week. And so I thought, yeah, that's a great idea.
What's up next week, Renee?
So we're going to be talking about the Kentucky Wood Expo. That's going to come up in September. It's like the next weekend. And also then our very own Chad Nyman is going to be on talking about some wood product initiatives that he has going to be going on. So it'll be very, very interesting. So we hope you all will join us.
Yeah, and no doubt. And go ahead and mark your calendars if you're in the Lexington area next Friday or Saturday for the Kentucky Wood Expo. It's going to take place at Masterson Station Park. So please go ahead and put it on your calendar for Friday and Saturday of next week. Many of us and our team will be out there teaching sessions, and you'll see Renee running around on a golf cart all over the place, putting out fires everywhere. So it's always fun to watch that. But come join us out at the Wood Expo.
So, there's going to be a forest health thing on Friday. Dr. Ellen Crocker will be teaching that from 1 to 4. And then Billy's going to actually do a tree ID at 10 o'clock on Saturday.
Come out and join us.
Oh, come out. I mean, I think it's like $7 to get into the show. But then at 10 o'clock on Saturday, Billy will show you how to do some tree ID live and in person.
Yeah, and we're going to have food trucks out there and some other activities. You'll get a chance to see some equipment, interact with a lot of other professionals and other groups out there that are tied to the forest industry here in Kentucky. So come join us.
Forest logging and lumberjack games.
Stuff.
All day Saturday is going to be lumberjack games going on.
If you got family, bring the kids out. They really love coming out there. I remember bringing my sons when they were younger, and they really enjoyed seeing all the equipment and just getting around it. Yeah, so come on out, make a weekend. Join us next weekend at the Kentucky Wood Expo.
Definitely. All right. Yeah, we can send you a link. We'll get that out to you shortly. So, but thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate everybody being on. And remember, you can go to fromthewoodstoday.com to get any of our past shows. But we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today. From the woods today.